Hey, welcome back to Two Super Guys Trade Stocks. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Vinny. And holy crap, are we getting towards justice season? I love it. People that committed the atrocious fraud of the most recent kind of economic bubble are starting to pay the price for it. And oh boy, is it sweet justice. I love it.
Two Super Guys Trade Stocks. So, huh?
Yeah, we had a couple of big headlines this week, and then we have another kind of news story that's coming up again soon here, which has been a very much one of our favorite topics on this channel.
Yes.
Near and dear to our hearts.
People don't realize this is fairly unprecedented for someone with billions and billions of dollars to be tried for fraud, right? The amount of fraud that happened in 2008, no one went to jail. There's like one guy for like 50 days. He didn't count. No one really went to jail, paid any serious paid a serious price. The Theranos chick did. I don't remember her. Was it 10 years?
It was under 10 years, like 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for a $9 billion fraud, that's got off pretty light, a little, those kind of sort of thing.
That's where I'm going to ask this question in the next slide. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So this actual slide, I don't know if you've seen before. I forget. So SBF was convicted this week. That's the major headline here. He's facing up to 115 years in prison from this trial. Okay. He has the possibility of having another trial next year as well. So
for what?
Yeah. Bad boy. For actually, it's related to bribery of government officials and campaign finance charges.
Oh.
So there's an interesting debate about whether or not it'll take place. I don't know. We can get into that a little bit once we get to the actual slide. But the reason why I put this particular one up here, I forget which news publication this was from, but they took something kind of risky with this trial. SBF testified himself. I don't know if you saw the news stories about that.
I just assumed he's so freaking guilty. Like, it doesn't matter. It's this. I didn't watch it because I'm like, he's 100% going to get sentenced. Yeah. I'm waiting for the sentence, not the trial.
Yes. So there was some wild accusations, I guess, that came out. One of the more interesting ones was that allegedly his girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, testified to the fact that at one point the Chinese regulator had seized like $1 billion in their funds. In order to get that back, she alleges that Sam paid a bribe to Chinese government officials, and that they used then Thai prostitutes to get the money back as like middlemen.
Okay. Honestly, that kind of sounds accurate.
I mean, anytime the story
in China.
Yeah, if it involves Thai prostitutes, you probably are winning the story here, okay?
Probably, yeah.
But so he got on the stand, and during his direct examination, he really tried to, kind of follow his trajectory of, I don't know, I wasn't really in charge, and and then, really specific memories of things that happened and how it wasn't his responsibility. And then they get a cross-examination from the U.S. Kind of government attorney, and this is basically what he said. he kept all of his answers super short and just made himself look like, I don't remember, I'm not sure. Yup, that sounds correct. As he initially denied things, they were given examples of it, and then he continued to just go ahead and say like, well, I don't know, I guess, yep, that did happen. Like, he made himself look so much worse. It's amazing.
I mean, I don't know why they put him on this. I mean, if you're his lawyer, you're screwed. This is a losing case. He was caught red-handed. Like, it's kind of rough.
Yeah, effectively, what do they call that play at the end of the football game? The Hail Mary.
Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Did you say what do you call a Hail Mary?
I was being a. So this is what he's looking at. Is up to 115 years based upon the charges he was convicted of. He is potentially looking at a second trial, which includes another 5 charges. Now, this is the question. The other trial would be set to start March 11th. The judge gave the U.S. Department of Justice until February 1st, I think it was, to just kind of decide whether or not they're going to go forward with it. What exactly is the right course here? Because when you start getting into these, bribery of government officials, although it may not significantly affect the outcome in terms of Sam's jail time, because like I said, maximum 115 years here. I think the guidelines for the federal charges would have him doing something close to 80 years here. It's like no joke how much jail time he could be looking at.
I do not think he will get 80. I think he will get less than 20.
So the federal guidelines have a lot of interesting quirks to them. So the judge can kind of do whatever he wants within the range. Yeah. But they look at the number of victims and the overall size of the fraud are a couple of things, and also the criminal history of the defendant, in which he's never had any. But there's a lot of victims here, right? And the size of the fraud was very large.
Yes.
You could make the argument that this is like approaching Bernie Madoff level, right? Where he could be looking at spending the rest of his life in prison for this, and not even need a second trial because this one exhausted everything he had.
So not that I don't agree. I think he should get life in prison. 100%. That's what I'm about to say is not is I'm not saying he deserves a lighter sentence, but it's a non-violent crime, and he's young, and that shouldn't matter. I think he's going to get less than 20 years. I think he's going to get charged on all accounts. All accounts will be served concurrently, and he'll get under 20. I don't agree with it, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Interesting, yeah. There's a lot to be nuanced to it too. Like, they talk about the judge wasn't really a big fan of his. And remember, he threw him back in jail for violating his bond kind of probation, or not probation, but bond violations. Remember the whole thing about leaking Caroline Ellison's journal and those sort of things. So he's already probably on the naughty list in that judge's eyes. So you never know. But it'll be interesting. We'll get some news on that February 1st when the Department of Justice decides whether or not they're going to go forward with the second trial. Potentially, we get a second trial, which includes some more bombastic things involving political figures, and then we'll get a sentence hopefully next year. It takes a while for justice to make its all the way through, though. That's the Trevor Milton story here, right?
So I think what you're about to say is, with the other trial, it gets very interesting because it doesn't really add to his sentence. I mean, it may. If he really gets life in prison, who cares? But the people that got bribed, I want that trial. I would rather that trial than this trial, if I'm being honest with you.
It could be more of a spectacle, is certainly what I was reading about in media publications. But it takes a while for the wheels of justice to turn. Trevor was convicted. This is Trevor Milton, former CEO of Nikola Motors, who manufactured 0 vehicles last quarter. Just had to throw that out there. The actual kind of a guilty verdict came last October, and now after multiple kind of delays, he's now sentenced to be scheduled this month, November 28th, I think it was. 28th. He's convicted of 3 counts of fraud. And articles I was reading was saying he was looking at a maximum of 20 years in prison, but they didn't make that clear if that was per charge. And not that I think he'll actually see that, but he's certainly looking at a fair amount of jail time here himself.
I mean, what he'll end. This guy's a scumbag. The fact that he went on multiple podcasts is like, yeah, we're the biggest hydrogen producers in the Western Hemisphere, and had never produced any hydrogen. Like, come on. Yeah. What are you doing?
Absolutely. I mean, SBF too, that actually came out in trial that he did that whole media tour after the whole bankruptcy of FTX. And he directly had like private notes that contradicted statements he was making publicly about the solvency of FTX. Like, he went out and lied and tried to spin the thing after it had occurred. So he also was doing the same thing, where he was making flagrantly false public representations.
I think both of these guys, SBF deserves more because it was just on a much bigger scale. I
would agree.
Bernie Madoff, this should matter, but he was already like 75 or 70 years old. So when he gets sentenced to 150 years in prison, it's really like 15. So it's
the remainder of his natural life, if you will. And then we had this other one, man. Remember this story? We did a couple of videos about this garbage way back when, talking about how people loved it. It was like such a cult. And they were talking about how, I remember one of the things I absolutely hated about them was they have this great coin. It's going to change the future, man. And they wouldn't even accept it in their own like merch store. You could get a sweater with the Safemoon logo on it in case you actually believed in this garbage. But yeah, they wouldn't take their own currency. So the actual kind of charging documents finally came out this week, and they announced charges against 3 of the people involved in the early days. This is how much money they stole. This USD column right here. Look, the total of over $200 million was stolen from the liquidity pool.
Wow. Okay, so I had not looked. I'm completely new to this one.
I figured you had to
so go to prison, but
there's a good chance. It's going to take a while. Remember, the federal government has like a 98% conviction rate. If they bring charges, you're either going to plead or you're going to be found guilty. Is the vast majority of the cases. And when you see what the sort of evidence they have on them, it's pretty compelling. I want to say this entire document is like 39 pages. A couple of highlights. So Karony is the CEO here, and Smith was the guy they called Papa. Remember that guy, Papa?
Yes.
Yeah, the guy who was like the chief technology officer, and he was like by
Yep.
far and away a crypto genius. And like the highest degree he had on his LinkedIn was his GED.
Yeah,
I may have mentioned that in one of my earlier
you
videos.
did, and you got shit
Yeah.
for it because they
Oh,
were
I'm sure.
people who had Safemoon coin.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So Mr. GED apparently never learned what the definition of fraud is, as he runs off with $75 million to the bank here. They had some nice text conversations here talking about how Smith informed Karony just of purchasing 1 million Safemoon tokens, that he was basically inflating the price of their Safemoon assets in order so they could dump from the liquidity pool and run off with money. They were like literally running an internal pump and dump is what they're being
Seriously.
accused of.
It's a pretty good day. The price is up. Win-win. So that's what he said. People are gonna geek
Yeah.
out over that. But what a scumbag!
Yep.
He bought
Yeah.
a
This is.
trillion Safemoon tokens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, they were fractions of a cent a piece, but they were literally pumping and dumping this thing. There's another one here I thought was interesting. Bought the 3.8 billion, 60 million total true transactions rather than add to this liquidity as the SafeMoon token investors would have expected. Smith and Karony sold approximately 4.1 trillion SafeMoon tokens in exchange for approximately 8.83 million in another crypto asset. Then in a private conversation over Discord, Karony and Nagy discussed the plan to use 830,000 of the proceeds for expenses for the company and split the remaining 8 million.
Yeah. Okay. Solid. They did it over Discord.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Fucking.
When you're committing fraud and securities manipulation, you should always, actually have the conversations over things that have servers that you can't control. And it's just records of it forever so that the, Department of Justice can just come along and say, hey, they said this. It's pretty hard to get out of that one.
It's guys, you use carrier pigeons and nothing else. That is the only way to do that.
Yeah, personally, I like to chalk this out of mailboxes is how I communicate with Dylan sometimes.
Jesus Christ. All right, well, I'm going to say SBF gets the biggest sentence. And of these three, just because Safemoon wasn't as huge, will get the lowest.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably how it's going to go. I mean, Trevor Milton, he's only got 3 charges. So, I think it would be, Trevor Milton will probably still get more jail time, I would say, than these 2 guys. But $200 million in theft. That's quite something.
Trevor Milton's a scumbag. But I made a lot of money off that guy. So I'm still short, Nikola. It's just free money. All right, guys.
All right, guys. Catch you next one.